Hi, this is Jonathan Parker. The title of this video is Karma's Good, Bad, and Ugly News. I know someone who is completely convinced that karma does not exist. If karma is real, he says, then how do so many negative people get away with what they do? And I certainly do recognize that's a good question. However, ignoring or denying something that is real doesn't mean it won't affect you. Hundreds of years ago, people knew nothing about viruses and bacteria, but they were still affected by them. Now, I do know that some people get very defensive when they hear the word karma, because that word is not in the Bible, and therefore it must be satanic, since it is something from Eastern religion. And many people regard anything related to Eastern religions as satanic or of the devil. Of course, there are a lot of topics not mentioned in the Bible, but that's not sufficient evidence that they are sinful or satanic. The Bible does say that we reap what we sow, and that's a major aspect of karma. So I think it is fair to say that karma is in the Bible in principle, if not in the name. Most of the issues with karma are actually due to misunderstandings about what it is. And that's what I'm going to reveal and unravel for you in this video. Karma means there are causes or effects. And this includes the effects of your thoughts, your words, as well as your actions. Another way of looking at karma is energy that you set in motion. And I'll explain just how that works as we go along here. Karma is based on very deep intrinsic beliefs of what is believed to be true and correct or right and what is wrong and all the judgments and conclusions in between. Karma is a force of creation and attraction, and it causes all of your experiences. So many people are trying to get the law of attraction to work for them, but they may be ignoring this very vital aspect of karma. It's traditionally said that karma is stored in what is called your causal body, Causal, causal. The causal body is really a collection of forces that are the causes behind your every experience. So I usually refer to the causal body as your belief universe because it's really all about your subconscious beliefs. That's what underlies and causes every experience. And it's very important to be aware that most of your beliefs are actually subconscious programs. And in some cases, in fact, maybe most cases, they are the opposite of what you consciously believe. So, this being the case, you can readily see how this can create confusion or denial. All of your thoughts, feelings, and acts create and set in motion subtle energy patterns, and they ripple out and then they return back to you in kind. This is especially true of the components that have emotional content. In other words, emotions are the primary fuel that drive the karmic forces. So the other thing about this is really just an observation. It's not a religious issue. It's something like saying karma is like inertia, which says an object in motion tends to stay in motion, and an object at rest tends to stay at rest. And nobody says that's a religious issue. It's just the way things are. The direction of what has been set in motion continues until another force changes the motion or the energy simply dissipates. So this in a nutshell is what is karma. Now let's go a bit deeper. Find out how karma works. Your thoughts, feelings, and actions make an impression on what is sometimes called the Akasha. The Akasha is a Sanskrit word and it means ether. And it has to do with the energy essence behind all manifest things. So you create recordings or records in the Akasha due to your emotional reactions, your preferences, your judgments, attractions, aversions, pleasures, suffering, and everything else, whether you have hidden or expressed them out in the open. Each and every word you speak and all of your conscious and subconscious thoughts and beliefs make an impression in what's called the Akashic Record. So these impressions are made from everything you did, and that includes every choice you made, all of your conclusions that you came to, all of the beliefs that you held, how much you suffered, who and what you loved, what you are ashamed of, what you denied, what you took credit for. Yes, every feeling you had, every judgment you made have made impressions. So think of the analogy of throwing a rock into a still lake. Waves are generated that ripple out, and those ripples go out until they hit something. And then when they do, they create a reverse wave that returns to the source of the original wave. So one aspect of karma is it as a force driven by your beliefs that project from you that go out into the mirror universe, which, by the way, always says yes. And then it returns the energy to you with the qualities of the original wave. And so this creates an appearance of cause and effect. It's actually quite simple when you break it down like that. And you can also see how it works. So you can see how it can be a work of force of attraction to bring you favorable and enjoyable experiences and things, or experiences which you'd rather not have to deal with. It all depends on what you're putting out, consciously and subconsciously. And so this affects all of your experiences because they are basically reflections of what you set in motion somewhere in your past. You see, everything in your life is derived from energies you set in motion in the past. And therefore, everything by definition is karmic. If there were no physical forms, no thoughts, no vibrations, no desires, no movement, no judgments, no intentions, then there would be a quiet, calm, waveless ocean of consciousness. And this is sometimes referred to as nirvana, or still point, or non duality, or source. But from that calm awareness, impulses and intentions do arise all the time. This is how everything that exists came into existence. Desire and will produce a motion that creates a wave of intentions that divides into many subwaves. And that is what appear to us to be causes and effects. The reality we experience every day is the force of creation and intention behind the force. This is how all of our everyday experiences are created and sustained. I'm well aware there is a perspective that karma is an illusion. And in one sense, that I'll discuss in a minute, that can be considered to be true. But when we bring it down to practical everyday reality, it's not true. It is a function of what we experience. So, like so many philosophical or spiritual discussions, they often contain paradoxes, apparent contradictions, and this makes clarifying them challenging. So, for those who say karma is an illusion, that's a little bit like saying inertia is an illusion, an example I gave earlier. No matter how much you want to deny it or ignore it while you're in a transcendent state of consciousness, maybe meditating, that does not negate the effects of inertia on the person sitting there in meditation, experiencing the transcendent state of consciousness. Inertia state, energy in motion tends to stay in motion, and something at rest tends to stay at rest. And that's the same that's true for karma. Karma is simply energy which you set in motion in the past, and it will continue to have an effect until you do something to alter it or stop it. Saying that either inertia or karma do not exist, or saying that they're illusions, doesn't make them automatically go away. But some would like to believe that in denying their existence, they can pretend to be immune from their effects. However, disbelieving that something doesn't mean it won't affect you. Unless you are proactive in releasing yourself from karma, it will continue to be a force causing effects that impact your life until it either naturally wears itself out, and that's usually over many lifetimes, or it is sometimes balanced or compensated for, or whatever is accepted as sufficient compensation. You see, what is called your true self or soul has certain qualities that you'd no doubt think of as good, such as love, kindness, and peacefulness. And when you say or do something counter to your intrinsic soul nature, you set in motion a counter energy that attracts circumstances in line with that energy. So we can say that the soul is an embodiment of essential goodness, for lack of a better word in English. And I'm not using the word goodness in any kind of a moralistic label, but rather it's a description and an acknowledgement of the nature of the soul. The soul embodies every wonderful, admirable trait and virtue. And lying, cheating, stealing, harming others, anger, hatred, betrayal, grudges, those are all out of integrity with the essential good nature of the soul. And therefore, by the natural law of the way the universe is set up, they bring consequences, whether the person believes in the forces or not. And this is sometimes called the law of consequences or cause and effect. Now realize karma is as much about good news as bad news. Everybody lives under the umbrella of karma, and it is certainly not all bad news because karma also refers to the continuance of what you like and love. But often the balancing requirement is due to thoughts, words, or actions that violate a person's integrity or alignment with their self, with their soul. Whenever something is done counter to the nature of the soul, there is a pattern of conflict, and that will play itself out through some need to balance or compensate for it to bring you back into harmony with your soul. Or if you prefer, you have energized forces of creation and attraction for the quality of whatever your thoughts, words, emotions, and actions are. But either way, you choose to view it. You are the source of your experiences. Now, when a person is not in integrity, there are natural consequences. Ego reactions create mental and emotional energy patterns, which have creative and attractive forces. In the unconscious realms of subtle energies where these patterns reside, like attracts like. And so the patterns, which are out of integrity with the soul, will create and attract energies which are not consistent with the nature of the soul. And this can mean negative or painful experiences. So for those who think they're getting away with their actions, that's only a short-term apparent condition. The creation or attraction is not usually immediate, which gives the person ignorant of or denying karma the illusion they've escaped it. But once the forces are set in motion, they will find expression unless there's a shift in consciousness and the energies are shifted and cleared. It doesn't matter if a person is a psychopath without a conscience. Once certain forces are set in motion, there will be consequences. In many cases, the consequences carry over even from this lifetime to other lifetimes. And you certainly don't remember what you did all the time in past lives, or maybe what you didn't do. But those are forces creating what you are experiencing now, right now, in your current lifetime. So these patterns can carry over many lifetimes. I've actually tracked some with people that go back as many as 50 lifetimes. And person had no memory of what the original cause was. Now, there's another cause or effects people experience. Have you ever heard the expression, don't rush in where angels fear to tread? This refers to a person putting themselves in dangerous or difficult situations without thinking carefully enough about the possible consequences. So, an otherwise good and well intentioned person can, due to free will, put themselves in dangerous situations, in which case they may suffer. For instance, if you go walking across a battlefield, there's a good chance somebody's going to shoot at you. And that's not because you're a bad person. You're just a person who made a bad choice in that situation. And this results from the law of consequences at work. Now, there is an inherent problem for you with the law of consequences, and that is the fact that you're never quite sure when sufficient suffering has balanced or paid for or compensated for a past, quote, misdeed. And this problem arises from not being able to objectively quantify the value or the lack thereof of the misdeed. So let me give you an example. Let's say you stole some money from your mother's purse when you were a young child. You might have some guilt about that, and that guilt could lead to certain consequences. Maybe someone would steal something from you at a later time. Or there could be some other attempt to pay for your guilt through some loss or pain that you experience. But here's the problem. Suffering by having something stolen from you, or have you experienced some other loss or pain, does not necessarily relieve you of the deep-seated guilt over your actions of having stolen something yourself. So you might suffer loss in some aspect, but you never equate it to the penalty for feeling guilty about your original act of stealing something from your mother. As a consequence, you could continue to suffer in a vain attempt to pay for your guilt or diminish it in some way. Now, this is a rather minor example of how the law of consequences works. Now, you might ask, why is this even so? Where does this law of consequence even come from? Because in most cases, a person never consciously makes the connection with their suffering as a consequence for a particular action. Maybe something they did in their past, could have been years in their past. And then when you introduce past lives into the equation, everyone has had the process become even more tangled and difficult to figure out. And most people never do. They just go on suffering some loss or lack. And in some cases, they pay for it over and over again. And this is one more aspect of karma that I need to cover with, because it gives the explanation of why some positive and negative experiences are attracted to you. So in this case, you regard karma as an indication of your consciousness level. For instance, if you are a deeply heart-centered, unconditionally loving person, you are most likely going to attract others who have similar qualities. But the opposite is also true. If you are not living in integrity, and so you take advantage of others, you lie, cheat, steal, and you have what others might regard as negative traits, then you're going to tend to attract corresponding similar vibration people and circumstances. Remember, there are causes for every effect. Effects don't just rise without causes, but most of the causes that arise with consequences are warehoused in the subconscious mind, and sometimes even in unconscious places, not necessarily all the mind. So most people never make the connection or even think there's anything they can do about it. They may simply resign themselves to a mysterious fate or destiny, which seems to be beyond all controls. What all this means is your base level of consciousness. That is what is the determinant of the kinds of experiences you'll have in your life. Now, you've also heard those who live by the sword die by the sword. And this is not a curse. It's actually an observation of those who spend their time battling others, and they are likely to die under those circumstances. So this describes consequences based on the consciousness level and lifestyle of the person. Now, the big question now is, how do you escape from the pain of negative karma? Well, there are at least three major painless ways for you to become free from negative karma. Undoubtedly, there's more, but these three are the main ones that I want to mention here. And you may want to apply yourself to some of them, or maybe even all of them, or whatever feels most comfortable for you, and whatever is compatible with your orientation. And so the first method is a particularly beautiful one of having deep devotion to God or a higher power. And this can be expressed through an ongoing practice of prayers, mantras, ceremonies, rituals, and meditation. And maybe there are some other spiritual activities. And over time, this will create a field that will release and dissolve negative karmic creative patterns. The second approach is to utilize a methodical recognition, acknowledgement, and removal of each karmic pattern through some releasing techniques, such as forgiveness or subtle energy clearing methods. This would include clearing hatred, anger, grudges, guilt, and the like. And there are any number of subtle energy healing methods that can help you with this. You can either do them yourself, or if you want to move along a lot more quickly, find someone who's knowledgeable and skilled at doing subtle energy clearing. Because you can save yourself years. You can save yourself not only decades, but even lifetimes of working on your own. So there's also a side benefit from working with someone, and that is that they can help you find things that you might not even be aware of or may not remember. It could be patterns stuck in your aura somewhere, conclusions that you came to somewhere along the way, and you completely forgot about. The third karmic releasing method is perhaps the most relevant to Westerners of all the ways of transcending and clearing karma. It is through deep surrender. And in a spiritual content, surrender is about releasing all forms of holding on to the negative issues or emotions. It's a very deep form of letting go. And ultimately, this is where all the spiritual paths converge and agree. All spiritual paths agree on surrender is the ultimate approach. Although the methods, of course, of implementing it vary a lot from one organization or group to another. Some are a whole lot more effective than others. Those that rely on ceremonies and rituals are the slowest. Those that root out specific negative beliefs and programs are the quickest. Because everything was created with a force of will. It takes a measure of your free will choice and decision making to acknowledge and release all attachments to what was created. So, with your free will, you're essentially giving yourself permission to release it. The ego and all of its characteristics just doesn't disappear automatically and instantaneously because you ask it to. You're a very powerful creator. And when you put a force of will and intentions, and especially with emotions, into your choice or decision, you empower with tremendous, persistent creative force. So to switch to letting go of what you've previously invested a whole lot of energy into, maybe with a lot of emotion, it's going to take some time, attention, persistence, and very deep surrendering of every aspect of yourself that holds on to or sustains the pain of the struggle. I've recorded 4 meditations in my MP3 audio program on how to clear karma. If you're interested in a more complete program on how to do it, it will guide you through it. And that program utilizes a number of different techniques to release and clear, all the way down to a cellular level of karmic agreements, karmic debts, karmic contracts, and karmic limitations, including karmic ancestral patterns. Now, there is a hidden bonus for you in the surrender process. When you reach a state of surrender, you are no longer holding, judging, reacting, or resisting anything. Therefore, there's no part of you holding or creating negative karma. It's as if karma no longer exists for you, not because it never existed, but you are so surrendered, so deeply surrendered and in alignment with the essential purity and goodness of your soul, that you are no longer sustaining negative thoughts, beliefs, reactions, or karma in any way. This happens when surrender ceases to be the process and has become a state of your being. So at first, you practice surrendering the causes and the effects in your life. That is the surrender process. You might say, I surrender all my struggle, all of my anger, all of my fear, and all of my pain. And you might get some relief. But then as you continue deepening into surrendering, you eventually arrive at a new state of being, the state of being surrendered, a state that you're in all the time. So the practice of surrender eventually leads you to a state of surrender where you are surrendered to everything. Now, that doesn't mean you become a doormat. It means you are much more acceptant and non-judgmental, but that doesn't necessarily imply agreement. So this freedom means you may freely move toward or away from any situation of your choice, and you can be in complete and in deep peace. The practice of surrender is a place where you begin learning about what it means to surrender. It is important to make surrendering an ongoing practice until you reach the state where you are surrendered, because there are many things in your blind spots that are out of your conscious awareness. You might even be in denial of it, and it takes time for them to come to the surface. That can take months and sometimes even years to fully delve the depths of a surrender process. But the rewards lead you to liberation, self-realization, enlightenment, and ascension. It takes you to the culmination of the human evolutionary experience. And I have more extensive discussions with guided meditations on the surrender process in my audio program titled The Secret of Letting Go, if you're interested in pursuing it deeper. You'll find this in all of my programs on my website, jonathanparker.org. I look forward to joining you on my next video. So until then, be persistent with your surrender and your clearing process.